If you and me, baby, ain't nothing but mammals, and we're doing it like they do on the Discovery Channel, that is likely happening when the sun is in Aries. What's up, wizards? Welcome back to Hacking Fate. I'm your host, Michael Beeson. And today we're going to be diving into two chapters of Bonatti's Treatise 2. The first of these is on the division of the orb of the signs, and that the signs are only 12, and that they are neither more nor less. So what's going on with this? Well, Bonatti is trying to explain to us why the sky is divided into 12 signs. So those signs, of course, are the signs that everyone's familiar with. There's that blurry poster from Chris Brennan that has them. There's something else like up here that you can't see very well that has them. But, you know, standard starting with Aries or Cancer, depending on which way you're going. And that is what Bonatti's explaining. So he gets into arithmetical philosophical discussion based on arithmetic that assumes you understand the philosophy of arithmetic. He kind of glazes over it, so I will follow his example. So 12 is a very good number. It is one of the most perfect numbers. And part of that is because of the numbers that can compose it. So you, of course, have 12 and 1, so that itself is 12ness. And then you have 6 times 2, or 2 times 6. And then you have 4 times 3, or 3 times 4. And that right there should explain all of it to you, and we are done with this chapter. Just kidding. What Bonatti then goes to is he says another reason, because he says there are several reasons, and he starts with that one, and he says it's not even a strong reason, but whatever. I'm not sure why he would lead with it. The next reason is kind of based on the 4 times 3 or 3 times 4 part of that discussion, and that has to do with the elements and the modes. So let's start with the elements. Everything in the world that you experience, everything that you can sense with your touches or smell, those kinds of things are all elemental. We are composed of elements ourselves. If we were not composed of elements, astrology wouldn't be quite as fancy and effective. So with that understanding that we are composed of elements, what are elements? Well, elements are pretty abstract building blocks. And Bonatti follows both Aristotle and the Stoics here. The way he follows Aristotle is he assigns each element 2 qualities that compose it. And so those are for fire, it's composed of hot and dry. Then you have air, which is composed of hot and wet. Then you have water, which is composed of cold and wet or moist. And then you have earth, which is composed of cold and dry. Then he ascribes each one of those qualities. There's a dominant quality. And in this case, the dominant quality of fire is, of course, heat. The dominant quality of air is moistness, and Dykes argues that you should actually rethink that and consider the dominant quality of air coldness and the dominant quality of water moistness. So I'm not sure I will go with Dykes because I've been through a few initiations, and in the occult schools and mystery schools I've been through, they've kind of followed Bonatti's elements, and maybe Bonatti's mistake here is what led to that, which is interesting and very, very possible. So after air comes water. So water's dominant quality is coldness. And then earth, which dominant quality is dryness. And that's, again, playing into both Aristotle and the Stoics at the same time with a little bit of an original spin that may have been a mistake. So when it comes to the beingness or modes, everything that's corporeal has a beginning, middle, and end. That's just the way time works. So something begins life and grows until it's what it's going to be, and then it stays there for a while. And then it goes through this mutable period where it flips back and forth between what it is and the next thing that's going to come out of it. And that's how seasons change. And actually, seasons are how we'll explore that in the next chapter. But, well, kind of. We'll be exploring modes in the next chapter by element. So if you look at spring, so in the beginning of spring, you have things warming up in Aries. So you have a lot of stuff going on, and we'll get into much more detail about animals getting it on in the next chapter. But we have a lot of stuff starting when it comes to spring. So that's the beginning of spring. Then you have that nice warm period that is most of spring when things kind of generate. And you're able to really enjoy the season. And that's kind of what you think of usually when you think of spring, is you think of that period that things are a bit fixed. Then with the mutability, you start having intemperately hot days mingling with the standard spring days. And that's the ending of the thing. So what Bonatti says is that each of these elements experiences each of the modes, and so beginning, middle, and end times fire, air, water, and earth gives you 12. And he lays them out and says the fiery ones are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Earthy ones are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. Airy ones are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And watery ones are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. And he's following starting with Aries. So notice how he starts with the fire ones, because Aries, then you have Taurus, then you have Gemini, and then you have Cancer. That's just kind of how he lays it out. There's a bunch of examining these things as you understand them and trying to understand them in different ways, and then look for why Bonatti's listing them in the orders he's listing them, and why is he labeling them the way he is. It ends up in this really interesting way because, fire is predominantly about the having it with the beginnings makes sense, because we definitely kind of associate it with that, right? Whereas the fixedness, we have Earth is the descriptor there, and then with mutability, we have Gemini, and then we come back with water and start with cardinal again, which, interesting. A lot of things to be contemplated. And that brings us to the end, and I will read you the final paragraph of chapter 1, because I think it's fun. And thus it was found that the signs were only 12, neither more nor less. There could not be more, because each of them acts in the 4 elements generally, and each of them acts in the element deputed to it according to the 3 beings or conditions or modes, namely the beginning, middle, and end, whence, since according to the beginning of the 3, the signs act in every element, and the elements are only 4, it was necessary that the signs be exactly 12, neither more nor less. Wherefore Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are fiery, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn are earthy, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius are airy, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces are watery. So how does this manifest? Well, that gets us into chapter 2, which we will jump into presently. So in chapter 2, we're going to explore exactly how the signs affect things elementally. So what elements do they tend to excite or introduce, and what kind of impact that has. This, of course, is the elements that are stirred up when the sun is in that sign. So it also has to do with the way that light works and all kinds of other fun stuff. But again, we're taking it one step at a time. So don't get too worried about all the details. That stuff will be covered later. Right now, we're just trying to get a feel for the elemental impact of the signs. The formal chapter title is In What Way the Signs Act in the Elements, and in which elements every sign acts. So we'll start with fire signs. And I like the way that Bonatti phrases this because it's fun. And for Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, since they are fiery, act in the fiery element, but in different ways. So what different ways do they act, Bonatti? So here we have Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And hopefully you are familiar with the glyphs. If you're not, feel free to study them on Google. They're here, of course. That one is that is Aries. Then we have Leo. Then we have Sagittarius. So, how does Aries behave elementally? Wherefore Aries acts in the fire element by imprinting temperate heat and dryness into it. So Aries is temperate. It wakes things up. Aries is, of course, the beginning of spring. So you have everything starting to stir. The seeds are starting to germinate. Herbs begin to grow. Other plants begin to grow. Animals start getting it on. That is definitely a springtime activity. And generally, flowers and the plants flower. So that's very, very much the temperate thing, but notice how much motion is involved in that. It's really kicking off the movements that will kind of get the year going. And impregnation, very fiery. That's fire activity. So then we move on to Leo. And Leo acts in fire by bringing into it heat and dryness, far from temperateness. So that out of that remoteness from temperateness, the beginning of natural motion comes to be, and to the impediment of fruit and leaves, things stop growing. They mature, which Bonatti says is a kind of destruction. So things will grow and grow and grow until you hit that heat middle of summer, and then things stop growing. Fruits begin to fall from the trees, and that leads to a really fun passage here, where Bonatti talks about that. Maybe not. Yeah, making them decline on the side of destruction, wherefore they mature, which the maturation is, in a certain sense, a destruction. And so that there are few seeds which then germinate, and few animating things undertake increase or growth. Also, things that don't have free will don't get it on. They're kind of hot. They think it's not a great time to go get laid. Just not the time for it. And some animals start to disappear because it is hot and they don't want to be around in the heat. And that is the impact that intemperate fire has, or rather fire far from temperateness. And you see again, it's about that motion. Again, here you end up not moving because there's too much heat, and there's not a it's not a good place to germinate. Yeah, the falling of seeds and their devastation takes place. So I'm in Texas, and I can definitely relate to that. The summer sucks, and the sun tries to kill you. Like Mario, it's awful. Stay away from Texas in the summertime. Just trust me on that. Not a fun place. So at the end of autumn or fall, depending on how fancy you are, you have Sagittarius, and Sagittarius acts in the fire element by impressing into the heat and dryness far from all temperateness. Rather, he acts for the destruction of seeds and herbs and the completion of the falling and destruction of leaves of trees. So, at this point, the heat that's introduced, the heat and dryness, dries out the leaves and forces them to fall. And the things that can hide and go below the earth hide and go below the earth. And this is also when animals tend to hurt themselves. And you have, let's see, and the signs and planets, and for the reason that the superior bodies act in the elements, even if something and somewhere they do according to more and something. That's really confusing, right? So yes, in Sagittarius, things die because you're getting into winter when things are dead. So in all of fall, things are dying, and that's already been kind of put into motion by other elements, but it's fire that finishes them off, and it's the fire of Sagittarius. Then we move into the earth signs. So, indeed, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, which are the earthy signs, act in the earth element, but in different ways. Namely, because Taurus acts in the earth by imprinting temperate coldness and dryness in it. Yeah. So it doesn't cause problems. So you have the injection of temperate fire in spring with Aries. You then get a temperate coldness and dryness in Earth, and it doesn't actually impede things. It just keeps things moving. It causes the increase in animating things and the like. Because the generation continues. So you actually have Taurus coming in and stabilizing things and cooling things down a little bit, so that they're able to continue to do what they were doing. Then Virgo, which is right here, and that is at the very end of summer. Virgo acts in the earth element by imprinting less temperate coldness and dryness, and a kind more akin to destruction, so that far from natural action, natural motion comes to be, as animated things suffer and detriment and decrease, and herbs are retarded and the leaves fall from the trees. So we have the beginning of this cold, which causes things to die a little bit. It slows things down. And it really, it's kind of spoiling the fact that fall is coming. And that's kind of what takes. You already have everything taking a beating from that Leo that we talked about that was super intemperate. So now we end up with this temperate coldness, but it's not very temperate. And it goes ahead and starts letting things die and decrease in number, and that means things are dying off. So you get a taste of fall mixed with summer going on, which is kind of the classic mutable sign that season mixed with the next season. And then we go to Capricorn. Capricorn indeed acts in the earth element by imprinting intemperate coldness and dryness into it, destroying and killing. Nor are animals generated smoothly then. And if they are generated, they are few. And they're domesticated. That's the domesticated ones. So it's on account of people breeding them. And nor is nature moved that herbs might be born or trees grow foliage or flowers, unless fortuitously, nor does seed germinate and the like. So straight up, you have this cold and dry entering the environment in winter, and it really kind of freezes everything. That coldness prevents things from growing. Heat is expansion. Heat is growing. Cold is pulling in. So you have this very strong pulling in, and you have this very strong dryness, which is not connecting. That's dividing. So everything is being decreasing and dividing, so it's falling apart. It's dying. Things can't come into being very well with Earth behaving in that way. And that brings us then to air signs. So, indeed, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius act in the air element, but in different ways. I bet you can't predict what will be said about water next. For Gemini acts in the air element by imprinting temperate heat and moisture into it, strengthening nature in every odor and every odoriferous breeze, and strengthening the natural heat and the temperateness of air, which the individuals of a species rejoice, and making certain seeds germinate and the like. So, Gemini is at the tail end of spring, and it's Bonatti saying that moistness is bringing out all these scents. And so you have a bunch of scents on the breeze, and you have the winds changing and going to and fro, and it strengthens the natural heat, and that is making certain seeds germinate. So you have that air, which is, again, you have some expansion happening here. You have some expansion and you have some connections being made. So you're going to have some increase in the way that things are going, because typically when it's temperate, if things can increase, they do increase. And then Libra. So, indeed, Libra acts in the air element by bringing far from temperate heat and moisture into it, condensing and thickening it, and making it to be commingled and harmful to the individual species, and to seeds and herbs the foliage of trees and their fruits, and making it vaporous and dense with harmful vapors and the like. And again, we go into the vapors, the air, and it's saying that the air is thickening. And this is the beginning of fall. So we have a very, very thick air, and that is what dampens the ability of things to grow, because they're being smothered by this dampness, and they're likely to get ill. It's kind of like the scent of death is in the air at that point. And that is just the natural cycle. And we come finally to Aquarius, which is the fixed sign of winter. Likewise, Aquarius acts in the air element by bringing intemperate and harmful and impeding heat and moisture into it, making it extinguished and destroying the individual species and often those harmful things which animals and seeds and other invigorating things receive from the air. And those situations and that impression come to be because of the impressions which Aquarius makes in the air and the like. So, the again Aquarius, it does the permeating with moisture, and brings this stifling air, more intemperate and fixed than Libra, and that kills things. It destroys individuals and extinguishes life. So that's the nature of winter, right there. Now heat's kind of confusing, I know, because winter's cold, but the heat again is secondary to the moisture. It's that you have really, really heavy moisture, and that moisture is increasing because of the heat. So that is air. Now, water. So how are we going to start with water? Indeed, Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces, which are the watery signs, act in the water element, but in different ways. I hope you guys are as amused as I am at that. But the repetitiveness really helps memory too. So I'm not going to judge this very harshly at all. I kind of like having fun with Bonatti here. Because these form letter descriptions are just awesome. Cancer acts in water by imprinting temperate coldness and moisture into it, by which the movement of nature is for giving sweetness and nourishment, by which animals are nourished and live, and all invigorating things together are nourished, and the like. And this is interesting to me because Cancer, being a cardinal sign, and it being the beginning of summer. Now, with water, as we discussed, water's primary trait is coldness. Of course, Bonatti might have been mistaken there, but he does commit to that bit in these descriptions. So, I think it's interesting that this coldness is so associated with nourishment, and I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around that myself. So you have this nourishing stuff which happens with the Cancer, and I know you sun sign people are gonna be like, oh yeah, Cancers are totally nourishing, but they're also very protective of themselves, and like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. Like, this is actually the water element. So what happens when things are nourished? And I think that's worth contemplating. I think it's really worth kind of thinking about what it means to really kick off that nourishment. And is it that things are starting to, well, it's moist, so more connections are being made. So you have a bunch of connections being made, but you also have this natural taking things in. And again, with that cold, you tend to have decrease, but because it's so temperate, it's not going to change the number too much, and that's going to be beneficial. So if you're really looking at decrease, that nourishment makes sense because you're taking in the nourishment from those things around you, or the nourishment is coming in, and that's a consolidation, and any consolidation is associated with the cold. So Scorpio. Scorpio acts in the water element by bringing far from temperate coldness and moisture into it, by which the movement of nature comes to be more towards corruption than towards nourishment or preservation, on account of the corruption and saltiness which the action of Scorpio brings into the water, barely adequate for providing nourishment to the few things. So this is Scorpio affecting all of the waters in the world, and that's actually what we're having happen in these places. They're not necessarily bringing these elements. These elements are not being brought in by the sun being in those places in the sky. What's happening is the existing water is powered up at this point, and that's what's brought into the element. It acts through the element, but it really beefs up the element. So the water, all the waters of the world are far from temperate cold here. So it messes with everything that contains water, and all elementals, which are us, we are elementals. All things composed of elements are affected by this, because we're all composed of an admixture of all the elements. It's just what ratios they're in us. So again, this is where things are dying, and that makes complete sense because it's fall. So it's still moist. So you have this, it's no longer, the cold isn't letting you take things in now, it's shrinking everything around. So there's less of everything, and the nourishment's not good because everything's closed off, and the water really reinforces the death. The moisture reinforces the death. So at the very end of the elements, we have Pisces. And Pisces acts in the water element by bringing intemperateness and harmful coldness into it, by which the movement of nature comes to be for killing and destroying animals and seeds, and practically all animating things as a whole, on account of the corruption and irritation or bitterness and foulness which the action of Pisces brings into water. So, again, we have water murdering things, and that's all there really is to it. But keep in mind, Pisces is also the mutable at the end of winter. So you have this as when the final deaths of winter are happening, and you have the beginnings of the sneaking into the fire. So I would not be quite as hard on Pisces. And I'm not really sure. Pisces is also Pisces is also ruled by Jupiter. So you'd have some expansion going on. So you have this paradox of expansion happening at a time that's directly contrary to that, because again, winter is all about consolidation. So you have this expansive force happening during winter, and that kind of brings in again that what is mutability, what is the ending of a thing like. So that kind of covers how that ends. Is it's intemperate and harmful cold, so everything's been weakened, and at that point you get the last bits of decay and death before fire starts being invigorated and brings generation back. And that mostly concludes chapter 2, though I will go ahead and read a little bit more here, and then I'll discuss it a bit. And I know I'm reading a lot with this one, but this is one of those places where it really is kind of reading Bonatti and explaining it or breaking it down. So with this one, this is the reason why the signs are exactly 12, neither more nor less, because the elements are only 4, and the signs act in the elements according to the 3 modes, according to the first being nourishing and increasing, indeed, according to the second being not totally nourishing, nor totally destroying, according to the third being destroying. So he's arguing that mutability is all about destruction, and it is. I can see that, but it's a transformative destruction. So it makes that's interesting because it would cause the element to be destroyed, which would make that element no longer prominent. Interesting. Or maybe that element attempting to destroy. Something to ponder. Absolutely. And these 3 being contained in themselves, beginning, middle, and end. And every 3 signs acts in one of the 4 elements, be they the 3 firing ones, act in fire according to the said 3 modes. Then airy, act in air according to the said 3 modes. Then water, acting in the water in said 3 modes. And earth, it's the same thing. I'm not going to bother to read that. Ha, you got 1 out of 3, out of 4 that I didn't read. And therefore, Ptolemy, Idemon, Astrophon, Aristelis, Abu Mashar, and the rest of the philosophers are agreed that the triplicities of the signs are 4, because every 3 signs of that same nature act in the element deputed to that nature, namely the fiery ones in fire, airy in air, watery in water, earth in earth. And because of this, they could not be more or less. So again, we hit that limit. So we know that we have 4 elements that make sense to us. And we have 3 modes, and that makes sense to us. So if we accept that reality is made of beginnings, middles, and ends, and everything that we experience is made of elements, then we have 12 as the number. It just is. There is another reason why the signs are exactly 12, namely because the zodiac consists of 4 quarters, of which 2 are northern, 2 are southern, of which 1 is given to fiery signs, and 1 to airy signs, and 1 to watery ones, 1 to airy ones, of which each quarter contains 3 signs according to the aforesaid natures and aforesaid 4 elements. And I kind of did that with you guys for the way that I discussed the seasons. And then that really kind of concludes it. I could kind of jump in here and do chapter 3 and say why the elements are so disposed and ordered. And that is actually something I'll save for the next video. So, if you have gained some awesome wizard knowledge out of this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in next week's video.